Mm. So, hello everyone. It's Sunday morning. Um, washed my hair. I have an interview tomorrow. I haven't been on here in a long, long time. I just got a new laptop, and so I'm doing a different configuration. So this is going to be kind of a test run. Let me know. Let me know if the volume is okay, etc. This is down and dirty, so I just don't have time to make it make it pretty. One of the reasons why I am on today is primarily because uh, I have a bee in my bonnet about food. Um, just for the record, I have type 2 diabetes. Um, didn't always have a really great diet growing up. And I'm concerned because there's a lot of really destructive conversation right now with regards to food. Sorry. This always happens to me. I'm always sitting I'm always sitting there. I'm like trying to I'm trying to like figure this all out. And again, it's a laptop. If I had a different kind of a different setup, it would be a little bit better. Anyway, um, so there was a woman on TikTok that's kind of gone viral. Uh, her name is Latasha Mercado, I think. And a lot of people have been commenting and redoing her videos because she got on TikTok. And her channel is she's obviously MAGA, and she's Christian. She supported Charlie Kirk, etc. And she got on her channel one day, and she's sitting there eating a piece of toast, and she's going chomp, 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 right? As she is talking about, she goes, so their everybody that's worried about their November health benefits, their November SNAP benefits, and she's chomping on her toast, really kind of like snidely. She's like, "Well, what happened to your October benefits?" Insinuating that all these people that are worried about not getting SNAP somehow misused their October benefits. And she's had previous videos, mind you, with regards to in criticizing Black women who are presumably on welfare and who are on SNAP. And I have yet to go out and find the original videos that she was commenting on, but that there are Black women that were complaining because their babies aren't, will only drink pop and eat pizza. Okay. And she's being very snide and talking about, because she talks about how she's really good about uh, using whole foods and doing meal prepping and planning and stuff like that. And I mean, her whole channel, her whole life story is more complicated. Like she doesn't have access to her kids. She lost custody of her kids, the whole 9 yards. So, I mean, it's kind of like be careful. Pot meat's coming. It's like be careful of when you throw stones, right? I've started a blog over on WordPress. It's basically also out of the forest. And I was writing about that issue, and it's hard to write one article about a very complicated issue such as food. And I think that it is important to really have serious conversations about this. I think that we are getting caught up in a lot of rage baity attacking Robert. Let's attack Robert F. Kennedy. Let's attack all these people for causing all these problems, and they don't understand the problems. And it is a complicated issue. Our food system in the United States is very complicated, and it's a multi-headed hydra. A lot of these issues are, and I think that we have to work very hard at to not oversimplify. And I know people go, well, we're not overly simplifying. Okay. We understand that, things are complicated, but blah, 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 blah. But then yet they repost things that are, rage baiting themselves. There are really good responses to what this woman posted. And I've saved them. I think they're really good, talking about personal stories with regards to how there's a variety of people who use SNAP benefits. They're not, there's a lot of conditions. There's a lot of like SNAP benefits are not like you're not getting a lot of money during SNAP. Some people actually do. Like I know somebody whose father, who is I guess in disability or is retired, I don't know. He apparently gets $200 a month in SNAP benefits, right? I am recently unemployed and I get $80 in SNAP benefits. I've only been able to use 1 month. I got it, and I use that to resupply my staples because I do have a uh, food bank right down the road from me, about a few miles, about 5 miles away, and so I can get, you know, they used to have, grocery carts full of like cabbages and onions and potatoes. I can't eat potatoes because I'm diabetic, right? And they would have a lot of fresh vegetables, but, not very exotic vegetables, but you need to be able to know how to cook them, right? I made some sauerkraut with my cabbages. And I like cabbage, so it's not a big deal for me, And I actually made some. Got a big bag of onions, and I made a oh, I made onions. I cooked them down to eat later, and I froze some of them. So if you do know how to cook, generally my issues with regards to cooking is is lack of time and lack of space, right? I own an instant pot and a air fryer and a slow cooker, to name a few. I also have a blender, like a big, powerful blender, that I haven't used in a long time. So I've really worked hard. And my mother never taught me how to cook, really. I love my mother, but she was a doctor. She was very busy herself. She was a single mom raising me. I had a babysitter, which I know people go, it's just like, can we not judge people? We didn't live in a mansion. My mother was a well-paid doctor, but we did not live in a mansion. We lived in a really run-down, ratty, split level 1965 mid-century modern split level. My parents divorced, and she drove a Buick, so we weren't. She got paid well, but I'm just telling you that because walk a mile in someone else's shoes before you judge them or make assumptions about that. Like I would tell people that my mother was an anesthesiologist, which she was, and they would automatically make an assumption that we lived in some kind of mansion in the richy part of town, and we didn't. Uh, you know, it wasn't until she got remarried that she was kind of encouraged by her new husband to buy a larger, rich house that we really didn't probably need. I mean, it would be nice to live in a better house, but I grew up when she fixed up. It was really nice. Anyway, I digress. But the point is that I think that we make a lot of assumptions about where people are in their life, and we need to consider that. And the food in the food issues right now, the food conversation is really rage baity, and it's frustrating. It's an issue that is deeply concerning to me because I have type 2 diabetes right now. I actually got, for the first time, I got a Dexcom, which I actually am finding that it is not as effective as there may be some issues with it with regards to accuracy. I am not on any medication. I am not on metformin. and I am not on insulin. And I would like to avoid being on those drugs, honestly. I would rather take stuff like berberine or curcumin in order to manage my blood glucose levels. I like to be more informed. Thus, I like my Dexcom. And the only way that I got my Dexcom is because I ended up getting Medicaid as my interim health insurance because COBRA, which is the system, I don't know what you call it, the system. Like, so I get fired from my job and I had United Healthcare. We went from Humana to United Healthcare, and United Healthcare would not cover a continuous blood glucose monitor. A continuous blood glucose monitor is something that will continually monitor your blood glucose instead of having you to do it yourself manually every 2 hours, and you might forget. I have ADHD. It's hard for me to remember to go, hey, I ate something. I want to kind of see how this food is affecting my blood glucose, which is obviously insulin management, the whole 9 yards. This backstory real quick. I back in 2017, 2018, I had entered pre-diabetic mode, and I got on keto and I reversed all those markers. I actually exited pre-diabetes. And my doctor, right, my doctor at the time said, well, I don't know what you're doing, but continue to do it. Now, keto is one of those diets which I use very very minimally because people, it wasn't, it's not like, oh, it's a weight loss diet. No, I mean, I did lose weight on it, but I also improved my health. I improved all my inflammation in my body went away after I went on keto, and my brain fog went away. My mood improved, and I lost weight. Okay. And I exited pre-diabetes. That was an experiment I did on myself. Those were my results. Okay. Not just some influencer telling me what happened. That is what happened to me. So I feel that that kind of eating works best for me. Okay. I have issues when people constantly demonize fat. I think that's a complicated issue. Yes, there's differences between saturated fat and um sorry, it's early. I only had one cup of coffee. um, but it is I really believe that we do. I mean, and it's not me believing in it. It is a fact. We need fat in our diets, folks. This notion that we need to remove all fat is a very destructive one, and it was based on a faulty scientific report done back in the 60s and 70s, which led to the whole low fat, no fat diet, right? And you can look it up. There's evidence. There was insider stuff. It was something that was promoted by the sugar industry. It's just anyway. You can look it up. Anyway, that, that was my story. So that the whole conversation around food security, diet, health, all this kind of stuff. It's a multi-headed issue, right? Now, I will admit that I supported Robert F. Kennedy Jr. before he fled to MAGA. Okay, I had been following Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for decades. He was always on NPR. He supported the environment. He was talking. He was doing a lot of work with Vandana Shiva. Now, Vandana Shiva is someone that people should look up. She has been, and I'm going to use the wrong word. Anyway, Vandana Shiva has been somebody over in India that has been pushing back against GMOs. Okay, GMO, genetically modified foods, and that's a whole nother issue, right? And the corporate takeover of our food system is something that really needs to be discussed. And like I was saying, it's a complicated system, and we don't take that into account, okay? Why people on welfare and lower income, inner city people do not have access, or in rural areas, do not have access to adequate food. Okay. Partially it's cultural, but if you live, okay, but then there's a difference between your rural and your inner city. Rural people may actually come from a background where they actually were raised to grow their own food. They would have gardens. Their parents, their mother and grandmother taught them how to preserve and can food, right? Whereas inner city, you don't have access to farms. You don't have access to gardens. You mean maybe, I mean, there are movements where they'll say, oh, here's a city park. Let's build a garden. That was, and this is way back over like early 20, you know, early 2000s. Um, and that's gotten forgotten. There was a garden that was supported by lower income, more urban types of people, and it was on a piece of land in LA that was surrounded by a lot of warehouses. And for years and years and years, it was cordoned off, gated area where people in the neighborhood could grow food. They had their own little plots of land, or little, plots of gardens and stuff like that. And it was a community garden where people in the inner, in the more urban areas could actually grow food, everything. It was a community thing. Well, one day, apparently this piece of land, which had been allotted by, I guess, the government, right? Like the government in LA, stating that, yeah, you can use that for that. Well, it still was not like it was not owned by the people that were gardening. They were borrowing, right? They were being leased. It was allowing to use the space that wasn't being used by anything else. Well, apparently the owner wanted to finally sell it, and it went up for sale, and the people that had been gardening there tried to buy the property to own it. And there was a fight. Actually, Daryl Hannah got involved, celebrities got involved. Um, and they lost because it was in a warehouse, more industrial area, and they lost the thing because the guy wanted to build a warehouse on it. You can look up the details. It was kind of, and this was way back in the early 2000s. And I remember that fight because there were people that were really trying to fix the issue of food insecurity in their community by growing food, by building community, etc. And it was taken away from them by corporate bad governmental interests, right? And these people tried to buy it and tried to own it, and it was taken away from them after years and years of having this resource available to them. It was taken away. So, people do try, but it is hard. And currently, in the last many, many years, we always hear about food insecurity, food deserts, etc. And the mayor currently, Mamdani in New York City, is trying to address this issue of food deserts within New York City by creating a government supported, uh, you don't know all the details, grocery stores in New York City because he's trying to address the issue that people in the city cannot afford the food, right? Like there's not any affordable grocery stores in the area. Like no one will come in there or whatever. Or they're very low level, very poor, like in general, for instance. So I live in a community and we have a Dollar General. Or maybe it's only a Dollar Tree. Maybe you only have a Dollar Tree on your block, right? Or a Dollar General or a Family Dollar. Those are the three main low um, low level types of stores that come in there. They're badly managed. They're corrupt. They're not an adequate replacement for a proper grocery store. So his answer is to provide these communities with government run grocery stores because the corporate grocery store environment is not adequately doing the job of providing this critical resource in these neighborhoods to provide healthy food for these people, right? I mean, I remember years ago, uh, Kroger in Cincinnati wanted to remove their grocery store, which was down in a neighborhood, infamous neighborhood. Well, I don't say infamous, historical neighborhood called Over the Rhine. And at the time, there was a higher crime rate. Um, in the area, and they were like, "Well, this is becoming unfeasible. We don't wanna put our stores in there because people are stealing and da 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 da. There's too much crime, etcetera." And the Kroger that they had there was very poorly run. I mean, it was old. It was just kind of it was shabby. I remember there was another type of Kroger like that in the university area. They actually renovated the whole area. Now there's a newer Kroger, but security there is just it's like going into I mean, they literally have security guards outside of the Kroger, and they have these cordoned off areas, like, they've got the drug area, like the, shampoo and supplement aisle cordoned off with panels, probably bulletproof panels, from other food areas. But it's designed basically because they anticipate there is more theft. I remember in my own community, they implemented Kroger also implemented security, alarm systems and stuff like that. You would go out and then the alarm would go off every time. It was just it's annoying because grocery stores are complaining that there's too much theft in their grocery stores. Well, gee, I wonder why. Um, because they're expensive. People can't afford food. I remember going to my local um my local Kroger in my neighborhood. The police were there and they were arresting someone. And I overheard a couple of people talking about how this person had been caught before shoplifting, but she was shoplifting frozen vegetables. She wasn't stealing high-priced, expensive items. She was stealing, and presumably she had been arrested again for shoplifting frozen vegetables. Let that sink in. When we have, and then people go, "Oh, well, good. She stole. She was stealing frozen vegetables. She wasn't stealing a $50 bottle of supplements, right? Or, whatever, maybe other expensive she was stealing a bag of frozen vegetables. Um, and so, this idea that people that defend grocery stores from leaving areas and leaving food deserts in these critical areas, they act as though, well, these people, they just steal, there's too much crime, and, like they don't deserve to eat. I mean, they're just perpetuating this problem. They think, well, crime. There's a quote that I often use, and it's by um, Sir Thomas More. And let me look it up. I need to memorize this. Uh, I'm using this new computer. Hmm, okay. It's a quote by Sir Thomas More, spelled More, and it's from a writing that he had called Utopia. The quote is, "For if you suffer your people to be ill educated and their manners to be corrupted from their infancy, and then punish them for those. I hate I hate when I'm reading something and then something pops up. Hey, do you want to subscribe? No. Okay. Let me start from the beginning. For if you suffer your people to be ill educated and their manners to be corrupted from their infancy, and then punish them for those crimes to which their first education disposed them, what else is to be concluded from this? But that you first make thieves and then punish them. I will try and post this in the comments section. But that essentially is what is a critical issue, right? Like, why are there people raising up children in a bad manner? Okay. Without us understanding the complications of, we don't know. Walk a mile in their shoes. Okay. We need to understand the foundational problems of what is going on in our system. Um, and so going back to my original story about this woman is that, yeah, so she was snidely talking about how, well, what did people do with their October benefits? You know, if you're worried about your November, and so basically she was saying, you should have been better prepared. You should have, you don't, you buy junk food and you buy pop and sweets and stuff, and you're not thinking ahead. Now, I'm liberal. I had a liberal prepping group that I did. I fully and heartily believe in prepping. I think that prepping can be done by anybody. Um, I know that people that literally, I mean, I live paycheck to paycheck. Even when I worked, I lived paycheck to paycheck. Um, but it is something that, prepping is not just for right wing MAGA types, right? I mean, you should, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a common sense approach. Is it realistic for everybody all the time? No. But it is something that we should strive for. And there's a difference. So she was criticizing this one Black woman who was complaining about, not having November SNAP benefits. And so presumably this woman, Latasha, was criticizing her, saying, well, you didn't prepare better. And I guess you're going to be going to the food bank to get your turkey dinner for Thanksgiving. And she just had this snide, you know, self righteous, kind of patronizing attitude, which was not helpful, and it was not kind, and it was not understanding. And she just, "Eh, I'm so much better than you." You know? And I look back at other, and just some of the stuff they technically agreed with me on. I think that people should, and I'm not saying that they don't. I mean, I think that a lot of people, probably do know how to stretch a dollar. They know how to properly uh, prepare food for their family. They know how to cook a pot of beans, but there are a lot of people, however, that still don't. And there are people who probably don't know how to that know how to stretch a dollar, but they are not able to. They have housing instability. That's another issue. They have housing instability. So maybe maybe they lost everything. They don't have access to a stove. They don't have access to cooking implements, right? Um, and perhaps they also, like, this woman was also saying, well, you're going to just have to get a third job. And another woman was saying, well, that's unrealistic for people. How are people going to get a third job if they're a single mother having 4 kids or whatever, and they don't have access to affordable daycare? They don't have any family that can take care of their kids. They can't afford daycare, right? Because that's expensive and unaffordable. You can't bring your kid to any kind of a hustle job because that's forbidden. There's all these barriers to people who, you can say easily, "We'll just get a third job." You got to do what you got to do for your kids. I mean, why should anybody have to like work a third job in order to make ends meet? That's ridiculous. Nobody should have to do this. And so you have to push back onto the corporations and these companies that are not providing adequate wages, adequate hours, adequate access to employment, etc. Supportive environment saying, "Hey, I've got 4 kids and I can't afford daycare." What is that company doing? A lot of companies, they don't want to bother, not their problem, you know. They want the uncomplicated problems of whatever. So these are really complicated issues. And I think it's completely flippant to sit there and say, "Well, just get another job." With what time? Who's going to take care of these kids when they're out of school? You know, we'll sit there and say, "Well, I was a latchkey kid, and my mother, was a single mom, and she didn't get home until 8 o'clock at night, and blah blah blah." I mean, do you think that's okay? Then? I mean, just because you were raised that way in this day and age, you think that's okay? Like we have not made any improvements whatsoever in making sure that kids aren't latchkey kids, and if our society is so dangerous, right? And there's so much crime and all this other kind of stuff. You really think that these parents are going to allow their kids to be, staying at home on their own until like 8, 9 o'clock at night until their mom comes home from their third job? I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I don't understand, like, saying, "Oh, well, my parents said, yeah, that was like 50 years ago." Okay, like, what? Yeah, that it makes no sense to me. Like, people just have this disconnect, you know? Like, where did you live? Where did you grow up? Were you in the rural area? Were you in urban area? I mean, there's so many factors with regards to these issues. It's just insane, right? It isn't, I mean, I remember when I was doing permaculture and I was like, I think that everybody should grow a garden. But I understand that myself personally, if you're working full time, it's hard to grow a garden. It's hard to maintain it. You have to have the space, you have to have the resources, you have to have the time. There's a lot there's a lot of stuff involved in maintaining a food garden. If you live in an apartment, do you have adequate space? I mean, there are ways you can work around that. Even if you don't even have, I mean, a lot of people like, if you have a balcony, do you have enough sun on your balcony? You can do those things, but it will be smaller, it will be limited. In England, they have allotments, right? You can like pay for an allotment. Well, I've seen in some lower income areas, they'll have a little tiny park and they'll have some little allotments of garden space. And probably that is uh, contributed by the community to be supportive, to provide, healthy vegetables. So are things that are being done. And I know that there was at least one point where, like the city run government or whatever, there would be grants or there would be like, "Hey, wow, we want to support you because we know that there's food deserts in your area." I've always promoted like we should be teaching people how to. I had an idea program that I actually brought to the food, and one of the churches that has an extensive kind of like, get ready for employment. They do a lot of programs. They help provide uh, for like, you know toilet paper, paper towels, shampoo, that kind of stuff. And but they do also workshops and programs. And one of their classes they have is a 5-week class on teaching people how to cook. Okay. And at the end, you can win some cooking stuff like pots and pans and all this other kind of stuff. And it's great, right? I had proposed to the local food bank in Cincinnati that they do something similar and work and hook up with the Instant Pot manufacturer. Now, Instant Pot, it's not an Insta Pot, it's Instant Pot, the brand. I have one. I've had one since 2013, I think. and I love it. It's basically an electric pressure cooker. It can be used as a slow cooker, but it's not very effective for that. There's a lot of features and stuff, and it's great. It's a multi cooker. It's a great appliance to have. I think it's better, far better than even just having a slow cooker. Merely because it is fast. I mean, a slow cooker is slow, and slow cookers don't have as much versatility for certain things. Uh, but anyway, but allowing people to have a class on nutrition, cooking, that kind of stuff. And at the end, they would get an instant pot. And the reason why I thought that was such a great idea is because if they can move that device wherever they go, they might be in a hotel or a motel, or they might be in a temporary shelter or whatever, and they'll be able to use that unit wherever they go in order to eat and prepare a healthy meal, you know? um, like a soup or stew or whatever. And so that's why I really thought that that was because you can give somebody a set of really nice cookware and cooking implements, and they might lose all that. Or, hey, great, I've got a frying pan, but I don't have any place to cook on said frying pan, unless they also have a little portable cooktop, right? So, I mean, Instant Pot I thought was a really great way to fix that problem. But that's a complication. People are unhoused and they don't have access to secure housing, or because of repeated moves. And yeah, they may lose the Instant Pot too, but it's one unit that they can use, versus having a whole set of cookware that might get displaced, right? So anyway, I mean that's whether you can argue with me about that, but anyway, it is that there are so many issues with regards to this, and the other issue that I haven't struggled with it, but it's frustrating, is the argument by the right that say that the government should not be involved in all this. Like, always, this is my solution, and I'm really hoping that I am actually I don't even know if I should have tested this. Anyway, I'm looking at the volume on this, and probably the volume is super low, and I'm talking and you can't even hear me because I didn't test it because my ADHD brain. Anyway, I'll have to come on later and redo this. Um, hold on for a second. Hold on. I just looked down because my other computer, let's see, it's on, but I'm like realizing I may have to, hold on. Meeting's up. All right, well, hopefully the volume will be a decent. But anyway, so what was I saying? So the other issue that I had is that so I've always been a proponent that I think that schools should shift their curriculums to be more about basic skills. Okay. So I believe that schools, elementary schools, even high schools, should have gardens, right? And they all should have gardens. And part of the school is that all the students learn how to grow food, prepare food, preserve food, etc. And and all the skills that require for all of that, right? And I think that it is important, and people would push back going, well, that's the parents' job. Okay, well, what if the parents don't know? What if the grandparents don't know? I mean, this has been a multi-generational issue, right? And that this has all been cut off, and this knowledge is not getting passed along. So at some point, someone's going to have to intervene, whether it's the government, church, whatever, right? You have to always be able to provide that type of educational that educational instruction, because someone will say, I was never taught these things by my parents. They might come from an abusive home. They might be a father, whatever the reason may be. But they were not taught this stuff because their parents didn't understand it. Their grandparents did. There was a break. And I blame fully the corporate food industry, like Kraft, etc., that basically sold convenience foods, fast food, all this other kind of stuff to people as a convenience. They wanted you to spend money with them, not having to learn cooking skills or growing food skills or anything, right? Like our whole industrial farming, that's a whole nother issue. Why we have fields of wheat and soy, or excuse me, corn and soy and wheat, um, rather than, really supplying grant money and funding for more local, micro farms are. I'm not saying that we don't have these things, but I feel that currently with this administration, it's very iffy about where any of that funding went since it's all been gutted, right? Like Doge gutted everything in our government. So who knows where that funding is going to come from to support. Now, some of these are private, you know, private entrepreneurs that are out there doing micro farming, and they're providing all this kind of stuff. But there is, and they're doing it, and they're supplying, but they're like supplying arugula for some fancy restaurant, right? I mean, some of this funding, it's not going to be making you rich, right? Like, so growing food is not necessarily a get rich quick scheme, right? You're not going to get, but it is an essential service. It's an essential part of our food system. And so you need to really be able to make sure that you're providing access to actual food rather than just, corn. Um, But anyway, so I really believe that the schools should start doing that. And people go, I need to learn science. Okay, what is it about growing food, preparing food, preserving food that is not science related? Seriously. Growing food is all about biology, cooking food, chemistry, and physics, fermentation, physics, chemistry. Okay, those are all science related topics, folks, but in a practical aspect. All right, not abstract chemistry, right? Not abstract biology, right? It's hi, this is biology that affects my life personally, right? So anybody's like, oh, we need to teach science, not this stuff. That just needs to be with the parents. Seriously? Again, my argument about the fact that the parents they're probably not getting it in their home. I also believe that, it's just any kind of like living skill, because obviously the parents haven't been getting it, right? And that's my philosophy about schooling. Um, what else did I want to say about this? Yeah, I think that, and then the other final thing I wanted to talk about is the Robert F. Kennedy and the confusion and debate over processed foods and diabetes and all that other kind of stuff. So, for years, I got a permaculture certification, and that was that's basically about permanent agriculture. It's a system of design and how we basically create environments that are creating medicine and food and that are sustainable, that they uh, require less human input, essentially, over the long term. They're hard to set up. They are challenging to set up. So it's not necessarily a quick fix, but anyway. And through that, I was, a big popular thing was a Nourishing Traditions book by uh, Sally Fallon. And it talked about things such as fermentation and using whole foods. And so, and the concerning thing I've been seeing is that the conversation around whole foods and processed foods is suddenly being twisted and hijacked for some reason by the left. It's very bizarre. And there's this snideish ridicule if you talk about whole food cooking, the issue of raw milk. Raw milk to me is becoming the flat earth of the food stuff. It's like, oh my God, raw milk, they want to kill everyone, or fluoride, and a lot of these issues with regards to basic human health are being misrepresented, I believe, by the media, by people who have an axe to grind against Robert F. Kennedy. And again, I will make for the record that I am not currently supporting anything that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is saying actively because I am not following him. So I don't have time to, endlessly follow what he's arguing or what he's saying. Everyone comes back, oh, well, did you hear that he said this? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just telling you what I followed up until the time he turned over to MAGA. Okay. He talked about corporate capture of the FDA, CDC, that kind of stuff. And I believe in those issues, but that's another conversation for another time. Talked about them before. But what he's doing now, I have no idea. Okay. So I'm not going to argue with you about that. But few things that he's talking about is, the whole, like, I just heard increasingly some stuff from the left, people that claim to be into permaculture, um, talking about how there was one person that was saying, oh, you might be surprised to see that your favorite crunchy granola mom is a MAGA. And oh no, right? And I've been watching probably a lot of these and I was watching a lot of people that I knew, probably Christian, right wing. I watched a whole bunch. I always tell people if you want to learn how to preserve and prep, go watch the Mormons. Okay, set your religious bullshit aside. Just watch the Mormons. They have it down. They have that system down. They will teach you a lot. Okay, so I think we have to like put our oh my God, they're Christian, for the politics aside, they still will teach you things. And this is one of the critical issues that I see is that we are now politicizing and allowing people to use food and nutrition and diet as a wedge issue to separate the left from the right. Stop it. Stop it. Okay. We need to stop that from happening. Um, and but I see this going on. Like now people are ridiculing. There's nothing wrong with processed foods. Okay. First we have to define what a processed food is. Um, you can talk about is bread a processed food? It's we process it. Um, but what the typical definition of a processed food would be a food that is processed for grocery sale, okay? That we would put like a canned goods. They are processed to be sold in a grocery store. And canned goods replace canning, right? Like your grandmother, if you had a grandmother that did this, I actually have a pressure canner that I have never used because we have a glass top stove, and I'm scared to use it on the glass top stove because there's been warnings about that. So that's why I've never pushed myself to really learn how to can. My mother never taught me. I didn't have a grandmother that taught me about canning. So I know it from watching YouTube videos and workshops and stuff like that, but I just haven't had the means, and we don't have a dishwasher, so you have to be very careful about food sterilization or the glass sterilization. You can do it, but we don't really have the space to do a proper setup for actual pressure canning. I also have a water bath banner, but anyway, um, what was I saying? Oh, so yeah, so canned goods are the industrial version of what, you know, a mason jar canning is, right? But um, why do we have a lot of these processed foods? Um, it's mostly for shelf life. A lot of these manufacturers need to create, and granted, it has benefited society in that it has created more food security. There's less food waste. We can keep food on the shelves for longer. Hey, wow, I mean, throughout history, it's always been like that, right? Like we process foods like via fermentation or drying or some other kind of um, process to make sure that we can keep it for a longer period of time. Those are all good things, okay? But in the United States, with the industrialization of food, there's a really good PBS documentary, of course, RIP PBS, about the food adult, like the development of the FDA, which the FDA used to be a good organization until it was hijacked by corporations that, food industry, et cetera. But basically, we have the FDA because there was a lot of adulteration of food. So let's take raw milk. Okay. Um, During the 1800s and the industrialization of food systems, and there was more of a migration to cities, etc. Um, there was just a lot of very shady people trying to make a lot of money, and there was a lot of pressure and stuff like that to provide food. And so you look at Upton Sinclair's book, blanking the title of the book, but Upton Sinclair wrote a book about the meat packing industry. And you had the milk industry putting out a lot of uh, dangerous milk products. I mean, they would also adulterate them with chalk and lead, and there was other stuff that they would put in to basically stretch milk to get it to the people. But it was also because they didn't have pasteurization, they weren't utilizing it, so people would get sick. Okay, because they had a very industrialized. We've got to get this stuff out, and people were getting sick because this food was being, going rancid and killing people and making people very, very sick. And so milk pasteurization in general did a lot to help basically prevent a lot of these food bugs getting into people and making them sick or killing them. Hey, that's wonderful. That's some good thing. Uh, but what ended up happening is that now we have what's called ultra pasteurization. And so milk isn't merely just pasteurized, it's ultra pasteurized. And why are they doing that? Well, obvious reason is that they want to make sure that milk is able to be kept on the shelf a longer period of time. And people will go, well, that's good because then we're not wasting a lot of food product. Like we can keep that milk out on the shelf for 6 months or whatever versus a month, and then it goes bad, and then all the food waste, and then companies that produce the milk lose money, et cetera, et cetera. Et cetera. Okay. 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 That's a logistics issue. And that ultra pasteurization assists with that. That's a fair argument. However, the caveat with that is that the downside is that you do kill off a lot more of the um, beneficial ingredients of that product. Okay. And so That's, I think, why people are saying, well, we want to do raw milk. Now, I drank raw milk. I've had raw milk a couple of different times, one at Young's Dairy and one at a local friend who had a cow. Ate it, drank it. It was fine. I didn't get sick. It was very, very rich and it was very good, actually. Um, and I didn't get sick. I didn't die. I didn't have any kind of bug or anything like that. So I think that raw milk in very specific controlled environments can be safe. Okay. People freaking out that raw milk is just so dangerous. I don't think that's always the case. I think that if you are putting raw milk out in Kroger's in an industrialized manner, yeah, it could become unsafe. Okay. So I think that it's appropriate to have pasteurization. I think that it should be highly regulated if you are going to have raw milk. I think that people should be very careful about where they source raw milk. But I don't think that raw milk in and of itself is going to kill you or make you sick. Okay. I think that if it is in an appropriate, um, uh, it's in an appropriate local, very like the people that are raising it, you know how the cows are raised, you know their procedures, you know the safety they're taking, all that kind of stuff. If you know that and you trust it, I think that it can be very safe, okay? And if you know the risks involved, I think that that's personal responsibility. I don't think that we should go, oh, all raw milk is dangerous. Obviously, it isn't always dangerous. I've had raw milk, I didn't die. People that drink raw milk aren't automatically going to die. But the minute you scale up your processes or you allow a lot of unregulated people to be able to just sell milk from their cow to any passerby, you're going to get into problems. Okay. Because they're going to just try and what do they do? They're going to try and make money and they don't really care. And they don't care if you get sick from their milk or whatever. That's why we have regulations. That doesn't mean that raw milk is always inherently dangerous and bad. Okay. So that's a really big problem. In the discussion about like, oh, you're crazy, raw milk. The other issue side related to this is the whole issue with regards to fluoride in our water. Um, and people are freaking out that municipalities are removing fluoride from their water systems. I, for one, believe that uh, fluoride should be removed from municipal water systems. And I don't think that it's going to harm society in any great degree. The reason why is that fluoride should never be ingested by, it's not a supplement. It's not something you should be ingesting. It's something that is applied topically to the teeth. And when fluoride was first put into municipal water systems, we didn't have fluoride toothpaste. We didn't have fluoride dentifrices. We didn't have fluoride mouthwashes or anything like that, right? And they're like, oh, we'll just dump it. Fluoride is a byproduct of, I believe, the aluminum industry, and they needed a place to basically dump it. And they thought, hey, wow, it has this benefit, so let's just dump it in there. And then Crest was the first company that actually started putting fluoride in their toothpaste. And if you read on the tube of toothpaste, it says do not ingest, right? You're not supposed to eat toothpaste, okay? Why? Because it's for topical use, okay? We have tons of things that have fluoride in them. Tons of stuff for babies to have fluoride in them. They do not need to drink fluoride. You don't need to be ingesting it. So that's my thoughts on fluoride. But anyway, and suddenly people are all like, "Oh, well, there's nothing wrong with processed foods." Okay, well, it depends on how it depends on how you're defining processed foods. And you're also looking at if you go to the ANSI website, it'll define that, and that's American National Standards Institute. And it's basically defining why the difference between, say, the European standards, which is more conservative with regards to what they allow in their food, versus the United States. The other part of than just, making sure that it's safe or that there's shelf stability, right, is the fact that they add a lot of ingredients to improve the texture, flavor, um, look, um, whatever it may be, in these ingredients. And so that's why we have a ton of chemicals that do this and carrageenan and this and this and this and this. And yeah, some of the chemicals that are in there they sound scary, but they're completely benign. I get that. But there are a lot of other ingredients that have been put in there completely unnecessary. We have been so manipulated by the food industry, by the marketing industry to accept a certain level of quote unquote quality or um, assumptions about the way food should look, the way it should taste, blah, 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 right? And yeah, I mean, I want my food to taste good. I don't want it to be bland. I mean, I remember I grew up with red delicious apples. Those were the most nastiest apples you on the face of the earth. They were so bland. They were the bright, I don't even see them anymore. We had a Yellow Delicious brand, which is a little bit more flavorful, but then they had the Red Delicious, and that was your quintessential bright red apple, right? They had no flavor. They were so bitter and flavorless. I hated them. But a lot of these foods, even in our produce section, have been developed to look a certain way. And yeah, sometimes, hey, wow, this tastes a lot better than the thing that was growing wild in the field. And wonderful, that's great. We have been able to um, develop food that tastes better, that whatever, and even maybe sometimes even is more nutritionally dense than the original counterpart. Great. Okay. But the other side of it is that we've also been tricked into believing that, like food labeling, that's a big issue, right? Oh, organic. I was just watching Lewis Black, who's a really good comedian, talking about the whole protein wave that's going on. Now, protein isn't bad. I was just thinking about that all of these food manufacturers like Doritos, like ice cream brands, have protein in them. And they're marketing as though, hey, wow, these Doritos are healthier for you because they've got protein in them. And protein is good for you, right? I mean, it's ludicrous, you know, ignoring all of the other stuff, coloring agents, dyes, which are coloring agents, flavor agents, I mean, just the whole nine yards. I mean, you look at the list of chemical ingredients in a lot of these foods, and it's gross. And some of them have been known to cause cancer or other types of health issues, right? And we've had this conversation for years about why doesn't Europe have the same, like they have less ingredients in their food than we do. Okay. And we've built up a industry around these things that are basically tricking human beings into believing, oh, I like the color of this. I like the texture of this, or whatever it is, over nutritional quality, you know, or ignoring the fact that, people go, oh, well, water's a chemical. Yeah, okay, whatever. But I mean, that's a really bad argument when people sit there and put that up there. It's like, oh, chemicals aren't bad. Water's a chemical. And I'm like, can I smack you, please? But so yeah, anyway, it's just that, and that's what people are talking about. People, and that's what Robert F. Kennedy is talking about, are these ultra processed foods that have been marketed and designed for specific marketing features. And we need to reject it. We need to go back to whole foods. We need to know how to prep from like whole food ingredients as much as possible. Is there a place for processed foods in our food system? Yes. But you put that over there. I think we should be getting rid of fast foods. We shouldn't be relying on fast foods. And a lot of people say, well, that's common sense. But why are people being, a lot of people haven't been educated properly to that. Like And people are not put, I mean, there's times when I've gone through, I'm like, I'm on a rush and I don't have time and whatever, and I'll go through McDonald's or buy a fast food thing or whatever. I've done that. I bought Twinkies yesterday. They were nasty. I threw them out. Sometimes I get a sweet tooth and I eat something, but it's every once in a while. I don't make a thing of it. But it just amazes me though how much folks just focus on junk food and sweets. And then they deny that it's an issue. And I'm like, but it's a multi-billion dollar industry, folks, you know? And just slapping protein or organic on the label doesn't make it any healthier. And I know that people will say, well, of course not, like, but they still do it, right? Like, we're not pushing back on this. And it's a cultural thing, it's a marketing thing. It's manipulative and it needs to end if we are going to even be able to tackle health issues in our society, right? It starts with what you put in your mouth. And that should be common sense. And for some reason, people are, complaining about, this or that, the other. My final point, and I will end, is, I was talking about how, our society and our schools, we got to focus on, getting more people in the sciences and they need to come up with the latest drug or cure cancer or whatever. My point is that, and I know that not every disease is nutrient or diet related, but just think about this. If you are eating well and we have a good nutrient dense soil system, that's a whole nother issue too. That we can, that maybe that person won't need to have that latest drug. Maybe we won't need to have Ozempic. Okay. We look at these magical drugs, oh wow, or oh look, we can fix these problems, and they're benefiting big pharma or they're benefiting some corporate entity. But if we actually took back and made food that was healthy for us and lived a lifestyle that was um, more enriching. We slowed it down. We removed the stress from our lifestyle. Um, all these other, we got out in the sun more and got more vitamin D3, all these kinds of things, right? That maybe we would be healthier overall instead of being stressed constantly. And people will say, well, that's common sense. Is it? Because we're still fighting over how to define what a processed food is. We're rage baiting over Robert F. Kennedy and misrepresenting a lot of what he was saying. We're rage baiting over this. We're defending activities of corporate medical stuff. I mean, I don't think that the vast amount of humanity, and granted, social media is really bad, influencers are really bad. They can be good, but they can also be very bad, and you have to understand who they're being paid by, who they're working for. Understanding that the trolls that are in social media, there's a lot of people that have a lot of stuff invested in making sure that you do not have the answers. So quit rage baiting on specific things, quit being nasty and horrible and tearing other people down. And let's work together on having a better conversation with each other and listen and understand each other a little bit better rather than just being angry and attacking each other all the time. And with that, have a great day. Have a wonderful coming week, and I will talk to you more later. Thanks. Bye.